Okay, I've just removed the books for the next video. And here they are. Well, hello. I gotta say, I'm just kind of not in the mood to talk about books right now. I mean, I am. I'm really bummed out about David Lynch. I mean, I don't know. It's not like he's been producing anything for a while. Twin Peaks: The Return was the last thing. But it was just like good having him in the world, you know? And, you know, honestly, it kind of gave me a pang of fear every time I heard him talk about this animated project he was kind of half-heartedly working on with Netflix. I'm like, I don't know if I want that to exist. But but then I would get equally excited when they would, like, there was this Cannes Film Festival where they thought he was going to announce a Twin Peaks related new show called Wisteria or Unrecorded Night. Everyone was so excited. The internet was abuzz, and nothing was announced. But he was in Austin recording something on street names that seemed to relate to the show. What? I'm not into it that much. I'm just kidding. But you know, art will go on, as Celine Dion almost sang. No, but art always, man, I've heard art made in the pits of the depths of despair. My younger sibling recorded the song back in the day at the very, nadir, lowest of the low points, the opposite of the zenith of his life, then his, now her, and recorded the song called Will I Live to Be an Old Man. And I don't think I've ever heard anything more hopeless, but it's still like beautiful art. And happy to report my sibling is thriving and doing well these days. Though with a very different life than previously. I love these covers. I can't believe these are on top of this pile. It just kind of worked out that way. I don't know where this came from. Like I said, I just grab up all works of antiquity because I'm like, I should read that. You know, there's probably no one left alive, or if they are, they're like PhD students or a handful of obsessives who really like keep up with all the writing of the ancient world. Authors, you know. I mean, look at that. The saturated colors. Dang. How do you say that guy's name? Aeschylus? I will look it up. And this cover, this is like one of the best covers I own. I'm sad to see there's a little tear up there. But I think I might actually have 2 copies of this. That's amazing. I'm like, it takes me a moment to even realize what this book is. Billiards at 9:30, a post-war German novel by Heinrich Böll. Beautiful. Not that weird price. $2.65. This reminds me very much of some Polish movie posters I've seen from a classic bygone era of those, where they're just so abstracted, and I love a lot of that 70s art aesthetic. It's great. Though this was 1962, this book. Well, my younger sibling and I we once just went on a kick reading everything we could find about Korea for like a year or two. Just like really into it as a subject. It seemed to be a key to understanding world politics, etc. And between the two and America's role in the world, it was often just very interesting. But this was a great Korean novel I read during that time. The Other Side of Dark Remembrance. A very sad little slice of life of a drunken businessman. I remember reading this. Short fiction, The Portable Library of Korean Literature. Winner of an important award in 1984. Novella. This novella falls into the fiction genre, dealing with the division of North and South Korea. Stories of this genre often hold ideological conflicts and the ramifications at their center, rather than treating these issues up front. However, The Other Side of Dark Remembrance follows the mundane yet confused life of a metropolitan salaried man. Yeah. I remember thinking, I'm glad I read that. I kept this in my car for a long time and would just read a story whenever I was like stuck waiting for kids at a thing or something. And really enjoyed it. These are some of his earlier stories. But the talent is there. Anton Chekhov. The Fool's Progress, an honest novel by Edward Abbey. This book goes into a category discussed in the book, How to Talk About Books You Haven't Read, which I have read this, but books that you've read but that you don't remember at all. Like you might as well have not read it, you just don't remember it. I kind of remember it, but Edward Abbey is great, and I've read almost all his books, but sometimes I was very young when I read them and they blurred him with other ones. But Abbey in general, look at this, the Thoreau of the American West. It says Larry McMurtry. Yeah, I probably read this when I was 18. When I didn't know what the marks on the page were. I shouldn't go to the desert redneck voice when I go to say something not smart, because those people are often very smart. But Abbey always famously had a hard time getting an audience east of the Mississippi, but he really speaks to outdoorsy people in the West. I thought he was kind of becoming a neglected author a little bit. I've written about him a lot because he lived in Harris and Albuquerque, and I've met people that knew him, and our lives have overlapped. And many of his settings in his books are places I've lived, which adds a really enjoyable element to him. Like the Monkey Wrench Gang is set on Lake Powell, which I lived on for 7 months, and in Albuquerque, where I live. So I'm like, that's awesome. He used to live in a sleeping bag in Harris Canyon, which is right by where I am right now. And he was the editor for a UNM literary journal until he put a quote from, who was that French guy that wasn't Voltaire? Give me a second. Well, he attributed the quote to Louisa May Alcott, but it was, "Humankind will not be free until the last king has been strangled with the entrails of the last priest." And he was immediately fired, and the journal was disbanded and the copies mostly destroyed. I can't believe I can't remember that guy's name that said that quote, actually. It'll come to me. But Abbey's great. He's got a lot of good work. I really like Charles Bowden's book, The Red Caddy, about Edward Abbey. I feel like that's a good companion to his work to kind of get a glimpse of the real person. But this is, I will read this probably sometime because I go through Abbey phases. He's got a great style of short, snappy sentence fragments. And it's one of a kind. It's unique. And it's very contagious. If you're a writer yourself, you will find yourself writing in that style for a little bit, or at least more toward that style. Okay, I don't know much about this. The Death of Virgil. Virgil featured in Dante's Inferno, but also a poet, right? No, wait, who was that? Shoot, I'm forgetting everything today. Yeah, it was Virgil. But I also got this because, look, Broke is the greatest novelist European literature has produced since Joyce, and The Death of Virgil represents the only genuine technical advance that fiction has made since Ulysses. George Steiner. I don't know who that is, but, whoa. Oh, this guy's Austrian. Hermann Broch. Well, one version of myself in the past. Wisely chose this and got it. That's awesome. Oh, I started to describe The Tin Drum by Gunter Grass. A lot of Germanic stuff on this shelf. Interesting. I've just had many interactions with the movie of this book over the years. But the funniest one, and the book is good too, and I'm glad I own it. I will read it sometime. I haven't read it, but it looks really good. Won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Recapped the plot in a previous video, but basically it's this kid is an embodiment of fascism. And what he does is what a fascist population would do. And he's a stunted being in a 5-year-old child's body, choosing to never grow up. And very interesting book. Whoa, what a thing for World War II to deal with, to process. What did I just say? What a thing for the countries involved in World War II to deal with. Using like mental shorthand, but I'm like, you're talking to people. Having to make sense of this, like literally the biggest, most destructive event in human history. Like there'd never been anything like World War II. There'd never been destruction at that scale. Maybe when the asteroid hit the dinosaurs, but nothing in our times. And what a thing. No wonder the whole world has PTSD. But some very fascinating art sure came out of those years. comedic stuff like Catch-22. What? Dark, demented, allegorical stuff like this. It's awesome. We'll read. The Nibelungenlied. Oh, this is what Wagner's Ring Cycle was based on. But it's cool. Gotta love classic mythology stuff. This one on the right is from Nicholson Baker. He wrote The Mezzanine, which is a favorite short novel of mine, novella. All about a one-floor ride on an escalator. Incredible. And he wrote Human Smoke on the origins of World War II, a nonfiction, really interestingly formatted book of damning vignettes, all the ways World War II could have been averted. Some of his research on atomic-related stuff, I've done so much research on it myself and taken classes that I'm like, well, this part, you didn't read this, you didn't know this part. But that's the problem with nonfiction. But it's a reason that if you are a nonfiction writer, you got to really be thorough. Because if somebody encounters your work that knows more than you on a subject, you want it to really stand up. Otherwise, it'll discredit the whole project. It's made me lose faith in writers before. I'll get to that part where they're fumbling really badly, something that I knew. And I'm like, well, what about all the other stuff? They're all just humans, but, sometimes the illusion falls away. I don't know. Good reason to be real thorough. But that's a great book, Human Smoke by Nicholson Baker. I shouldn't have gone off like that on that tangent because it's a great, great book. And I wish more people would read it. It's a very interesting approach to history. It's written in these little vignettes in the center of the page. I love how it looks. But this book, Room Temperature, on the right here, is all about somebody trying to get a baby to fall asleep. The back of it just praises The Mezzanine, which is a great book. Easily the best first novel of 1988. Oh, I didn't know it was his first. That's cool. I think I read some of this. It's weird. Back when my kids were little, I kept finding myself reading literature that just offered zero escapism. Stuff like this, describing what I was doing. Or Knausgaard's My Struggle, Volume 2. Pushing a kid around in a stroller while reading about him doing that. What? Escaping into reality. How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn. It's one of those old school library copies you used to see in the 80s more commonly. But I have it because it was my sister's when she was in high school. She's no longer on this planet. And because this is the high school my older siblings went to. I think this is the only book I own that has that stamp. Kind of cool. My older sibling, Matt, and Leanne, they went to school at the same time as the band Gin Blossoms and knew all those members. And I loved that band in the 90s. And found all the members in their old yearbooks. It was kind of cool. Back in the 90s when I cared a lot about all that. Like, my brother Matt went to school with Doug Hopkins, who was kind of the founding member of that band. 1949. Like, I'm not sure that I would keep this book around if I didn't have all these sentimental attachments to it, but it actually probably is good in its way, one of these old-fashioned books about place. It'd probably be a worthwhile read. 12 Angry Men, another play for the Great Play Collection. I stole the ending of this play, well, the movie version, the black and white one that I knew, a little bit for a column I wrote a long time ago, where it was late one night, and I met this totally methed out homeless rapper next to a food truck. And he rapped this crazy whispery Radiohead type rap. And he only ever gave our group his street name. And then at the very end, he told us his real name. And I wrote a column. I had this column where I reviewed music that I saw that month, live music. So I reviewed that like it was any other show. And I used that at the end where he gave us his real name. But I realized it was totally ripping this off. Because that is super effective. Not ripping off, paying homage. Great artists steal, didn't Picasso say that? It's not stealing, it's being a part of a lineage. Are all comedians stealing that use joke templates? There are some tired joke templates. And some that still really work. Anyway, I say look for quality wherever you can find it. If you can adapt it, art is a garden. Borges. People really love Borges, and I respect him and am interested in him and acknowledge him as great. But he kind of just did one thing. He made up fictional works and then reviewed them as if they were real works. And that's very cool, and it gave him a lot of cerebral room to play around it. That's not entirely true. Well, kind of. I'm trying to think of an example. No, I mean he's more varied than that, but that really was his main thing there. One I've always loved from him is Pierre Menard, where somebody writes Don Quixote, but they do it in modern times, and they do it completely independently of the original, and so it's totally different. And it's reviewed as if all these modern things and modern movements had influenced it, and it's a great thought experiment. It's very conceptual, and he's got so many other cool things. I mean, so many interesting ideas he's brought into our reality. Good and bad. Did he invent the panopticon, the idea of the perfect surveillance prison? Well, he described one, had illustrations before prisons and schools were structured like that. This is someone I know I need to reread. Even as I was reading it, I was like, I'm going to need to reread this. But I have read Borges. I do appreciate him. I'm like, I think I'm a more emotional writer. It's hard to find that balance, but like when works are purely cerebral, they're not usually my favorite works. I've struggled with that with Joyce too, but I think he secretly has a lot of emotion there. Calvino, same kind of. I don't know. All these people are capable of emotion, but and I don't like to overwhelm necessarily, but it is part of the mix. And I don't know. Bookstores, you're evil if you do this. Find some other way. Come on. You disrespect what books are. Rite of Thirst by Frank Heiler. This guy's incredible. He's an ER doctor here in Albuquerque. This is not some Albuquerque local publication. Look at that. Harper Perennial. He's like a known novelist who gets great reviews. Tom Brokaw. Interesting. Frank Heiler, he would guest teach classes that I took. I feel like he may have taught like a whole semester I was in once at UNM, and he was like one of the best critics. Oh my gosh. He could read your work, even like if you were just working on a really basic level. And there was a range of places that people were at in the grad program that I was in. But everybody grew. Some people really grew. I remember kind of dismissing certain individuals, and then they were just like incredible by the end. Say what you will about MFA programs, but I think it's kind of neat that people care about art and like want to obsess over it, want to make it, want to really study the craft. I think that's awesome. But Frank Heiler was such a great reader and critic, and I always knew if he marked up a piece of mine and I followed his suggestions in an organic way that was right for me, that it would improve my work. And it did every time. One time, he was on my friend Ty's dissertation committee, and he said something about how my friend had set up an intellectual problem and then solved it emotionally because the intellectual problem was ultimately unsolvable. And like really complimented my friend at like, this is a clever thing that you did. But I was just like, oh my gosh, you put that so well. I had read my friend's work and had not put that. Anyway, this guy knows writing, and he writes his books in between like saving people's lives in an ER. He's a really cool guy. Oh my gosh, Frank Heiler. And I'm like so grateful for the classes that I had with him, and I will read this book someday. I hate that my to read pile is literally like 20 years long. Like I'm looking at a copy of Don DeLillo's Underground over here that I bought in the year 2000. It's right there at the top left corner. And, I remember buying that and being like, I'm going to read this maybe 26 years from now. But first I'm going to move 10 different places with it. Anyway, what I'm saying is, I'm sorry, Frank, that I haven't read this yet. if you see this. I have read other Frank Hyler work, and this guy's a great writer. He really is. He also wrote The Laws of Invisible Things, fiction, and The Blood of Strangers, stories from emergency medicine. Oh, I've read that one. This one, who's assisting with earthquake relief. In a refugees type situation. Interesting. Maybe I'll end here because, well, this is at 20 minutes already. I think I'm talking extra slow today. I also didn't have coffee all morning. I literally fell asleep in class today, just sitting there, just for like a second. But, you know, like standing up. Yeah, apparently I need caffeinated assistance sometimes. But Andre Gide is interesting because he kind of invented what we now call autofiction and used to be called the roman à clef, this very thinly veiled nonfiction is fiction. And he kind of started a whole thing. For that reason, I wanted to read this, and I have read most of it. It's another one that just got set aside. This does happen with books. I remember once having a conversation with friends where we were all like, maybe we should just say we've read books if we've only read parts of them, because we're always saying, I read part of this, blah, blah, blah. You know, no, but that wouldn't be honest, and you'd lose cred if it slipped out. Don't want to do that. But it is annoying to have to always add these qualifiers. Well, then I spilled something on it, or I lost it, or I gave it away. A confessional account of a man seeking the truth of his own nature. The story's protagonist. A couple's... Yeah. Oh, interesting. A frank defense of homosexuality and a challenge to prevailing ethical concepts. Oh, interesting. Well, I've always been told I should read Gide, and that Gide is great. But let's see. Knowing how to flee oneself. Difficult thing is knowing how to live with that freedom. Interesting. Want another copy of The Crucible? All right, I'll sign out here. Maybe with plays, it's good to get lots of copies of it, because then you can put it on with your friends with puppets. All right, peace out, everybody.